are now listening to the Blaklist podcast. HD Recovery. Jared Blaine. Bonnie. 2022. Let's get it. We once were lost, but now we're found. Coming back to life from the underground. We coming up, making a difference in our thoughts and our words and our whole appearance. We once was dirty, but now we clean. Chains been broken, and now we're free. So sit back, relax, and just take a ride as we take a journey through the other side. Welcome to another episode of the Blaklist podcast. Today we have Sonya Johnson. Sonya's been making moves in the recovery community, and she's definitely somebody that we look up to, and we definitely are very grateful that you are taking the time to speak with us today.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Yes, definitely. I know this has been something in the making, so we definitely appreciate it, and we see your moves and your come up. You're definitely out there making an impact, definitely. So we definitely appreciate it again.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started talking, I think I had like 20,000 followers,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. And that, I was just telling that to somebody yesterday. I'm like, she had, 20K, and now you're at 200K on Facebook, and then
Yep.
you're at a little over 50 on TikTok.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I was about 10 when we started talking there too.
So you, in just that short period of time, you've definitely, you've been making moves. And so we see you, and we're definitely stand with what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
So so why don't you start telling us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of give you the floor and kind of go from there.
Okay, awesome. So I'm Sonya. I'm a recovering addict. My clean date is 7/1/2019. I was in my addiction for 20 years, and my addiction started really young. And, I believe that what started my addiction unknowingly at the time is trauma, right? Like I went through some trauma in my teenage years. I was sexually abused, physically abused. I lost a child, and then the father of that child passed away, like all in a very short period of time. So when I found drugs, like that was the solution to my problems, right? I didn't have to feel anything. I could come out of my shell and be that person that I wanted to be, but didn't have the courage to be my true self, right? Because I don't even think I knew who my true self was. But so when I found drugs, like it was the solution. And back then I was a teenager, so I thought we were just like young and wild and free and having fun, and it was a phase, and that's like what we do at that age. But for me, like it quickly became the problem. Very young.
What age did you say that the trauma started happening at for you?
So I was about 11 when I first was sexually abused, and that's where it all started at. My dad and my mom got divorced when I was young, and then I was sexually abused by a man in my house. So it was like I was looking for a father figure, and then the father figure came, and then he sexually abused me. So it was just, very hard for me. But he was also the very first person to ever give me a cigarette, ever give me a joint. So he used that as a manipulation tactic to take advantage of me, and that's where it all started.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the ones you look up to, that are supposed to be the closest to you, are the ones that end up, hurting you or betraying you. I was just sharing that yesterday on Jamie when I was talking to Jamie that, my mom was married to a guy that introduced me to pornography and introduced me to, taking shots of whiskey and smoking and everything like that. So it makes it hard nowadays to trust anybody. It really does.
Yeah. And that's very common, right? Like it's usually a family member or a close neighbor or somebody that's really close to you that initializes that abuse. And also like you said, like the father figure in your home, that's what we were taught, to like drink and do drugs. Like that's okay and that's cool. But little did we know, well, for me anyways, I had the disease of addiction lying dormant inside of me, waiting for me to pick up that first drink and that first drug, which activated it. I was I knew I was an addict by the time I was
lost a child and the father of your child passed away. How old were you when that happened? Because I have a similar story, so that's what that caught my
yeah,
attention right
so
now.
I was 16 and I got pregnant and my parents made me have an abortion and I didn't want to do it, but I was 16 years old and my parents didn't know what to do with me and they thought that, it would ruin my life. So I remember like they took me to the abortion clinic. All the other girls were like, they did this before, it was no big deal, but I didn't want to do it. And they took me in the room and I got to hear the baby's heartbeat. They told me I was 10 and a half weeks and they took me in the next room and they took the baby from me. And I got pregnant at a party house, right? Like because of the sexual abuse happening in my home, I was hanging around a party house all the time. I didn't want to be at home. So I was always at this house where his mom would like let us drink and party all the time. Needless to say, we were also having sex. And he was my boyfriend, right? Because you become boyfriend and girlfriend with whoever's got the party drugs, because that's what got me pregnant, but we were also partying at that time. And he took that within that same year that I lost the baby, he took 1.5 pain pills. Turned out to be 1.5 oxy 80s. Back then, there was like the oxy epidemic was like just first starting. This is like literally 20 years ago. So it was just first starting, and we didn't know a lot of information. There wasn't a whole lot of overdoses going on, and he was the first person that I ever knew to overdose. That was in 2003.
Wow. So I have a similar situation, but I kept my baby. I actually kept my baby. That's why your story right now really called out to me. I've never heard your full story before, but the father of my child, I was 17, I got pregnant, and the father of my child, we were in gangs, passed away due to that. So that really hit me right now when you were talking about it.
Yeah.
What when was the first time that you ever picked up anything or your drug of choice? How did that come about?
I remember it clear as day. I can literally tell you where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, what the room looked like, what it smelled like, what time of night it was. I remember clearly everything about it because I tried alcohol, right? And I tried marijuana and, we were just partying and stuff. But when I tried cocaine, I will never forget it. The moment I did my first line, something awakened inside of me and I immediately fell in love and it was all I wanted to do. I just wanted to do more and I wanted to hang around the people that had it. And it was like it set it off inside of me. I was 17 years old when I tried my first line of cocaine. It was New Year's Eve and that was it. I mean, that was it. That's where it all started to happen for me.
See, I never messed with any stimulants or uppers, and so I couldn't even begin to, pretend to just, know what it feels like. I didn't like the fact of my heart racing or, anything like that. So I just I always stayed with downers, never got up.
Well, it definitely gets you going. That's for sure.
Yeah. I just didn't. I'm like, man, it would just feel so weird to like, especially, when people get into meth and stuff, want to stay up for 3 days straight. And yeah, I couldn't do it.
That was my DOC.
Yeah.
That was my DOC. So I can relate to that. But see, I have ADHD, so it would get me going, but it would get me focused. It would calm down. When people were like getting on my nerves, I would smoke just to calm down. Like I could smoke to go to sleep, but I could also stay up for days on end.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when you first start doing it, my experience was, and meth is what took me out in the end, right? But it doesn't really like make your heart race and make you like super crazy paranoid. Like that comes later. In the beginning when you first do it, it's like you just feel so good and you can just socialize with everybody and get all the house cleaning done and do all the things like that you want to do. And then later once you've gotten into it a little bit, then comes the paranoia, the peeking out the windows, the searching on the floor, like heart racing, thinking that you're going to die because you hear the train coming, I mean, all of that stuff comes later.
Yeah. I can identify with the looking on the floor. Oh, I think I dropped some. You turn off the lights and you pick up a flashlight and you're on the floor looking.
Yes. You do the flashlight at the angle, right? So it shines bright to you.
Right, 'cause it'll shine through the rock and you'll see it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Is that,
So
but so you were saying that like you're able to do the house cleaning. I can definitely relate to that. I got 3 kids, and is that a trigger to you now? Like sometimes, because sometimes we all have bad days, and that's okay. When you're high, you don't have those bad days ever, you know? Is that any, like, does that trigger you sometimes, or ever? Did it ever just like having a bad day? You're like, oh my God, if I was on this, I would feel like this right now.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the beginning of my recovery, right? Because when you're used to living at like full steam all the time, and then you stop using drugs and alcohol, you slow down so much and you've burnt up so much of that dopamine or serotonin or whatever that is that you have a lack of it when you find recovery. So you're lazy, you gain weight, like you don't feel good like you used to, like all of those things happen. And it can be such a big trigger in the beginning. And for me, like I went through my first year of recovery, napping all the time and, like just trying to get by and do recovery because that's what they told me to do. And I eventually like got in this like health and wellness lifestyle thing. I work out, I eat really well, I drink water, and come to find out, this is the addict in me, right? I realized that if I eat good, I exercise, and I drink water, I have energy and I feel good. So it's like I've found a way to turn that negative into a positive and still feel good, but in a good way.
so when you first started using cocaine, how did it go? Was it something where you can just do it every now and then? Was it manageable in the beginning? Like where did you go after that?
Yeah, I feel like every addict in the beginning of their journey like has a period of manageability where it's recreational and it's social, right? So on the weekends we would do cocaine, and of course I would do it if I could do it during the week, but for the most part, like we would all get together and do cocaine on the weekends, and then we would start all doing it during the week. And I don't know if it was like my friend group, I'm sure it was, but we all sort of became addicts at the same time. We were the same age. We started experimenting together. So we all fell into addiction kind of in the same rate. So, it didn't really present itself, even though I knew that I was addicted. My family put me in detox when I was 18 years old. It didn't really present itself as unmanageability for a little while. And what happened is I did cocaine for years, right? And I loved to snort it or whatever. And then it turned into crack.
Mhm.
That got bad quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long after starting, to use cocaine was it before you transitioned to crack?
I would say probably about 4 years. I just did cocaine, drinking, smoking weed, ecstasy, and then I got with a guy after the one guy passed away, and he had been smoking crack, but I didn't know he was smoking crack because he wasn't really like heavy on it at the time. He had just started as well. And one night I was at his house with his sister, and we couldn't get any cocaine, so they got crack. And I remember very well the first time that I did a hit of crack, I remember saying to myself, wow, that was intense. Like it was super intense. And it immediately throws you for a loop. Like, the paranoia and all that stuff, that happens immediately with crack. But I remember like I didn't like it, like I prefer doing cocaine over crack, but I still did it anyways. For years I did it. I think I did crack until I was in my maybe 28 or 29 years old.
And
That was,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
no, I was just saying that was quite a long time.
Yes.
The guy that you were with, so he was also using crack as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't have to try to hide it or anything.
No, and everybody knew. I mean, I never was like, I guess I did try to hide it, but at the same time, I was pretty forthcoming about where I was at in my life. But yeah, we did it together. And the thing about crack, and I think crack is probably, in my opinion, it's maybe not the worst drug, but it is the most mentally obsessive drug, right? When you're doing crack, when you run out, you cannot think about anything else other than getting more crack. You know what I mean? With meth, and as you probably know this, Bonnie, like if you run out of meth, you're still going to be high for 3 days. You know what I mean? Like if you run out of crack, you have to get more and you got to get it now. And it doesn't matter what you have to do it. So I think that's really where my means and ways of getting more started to progress, right? Because first it was like stealing, and now it's like sleeping with people and, you know, selling drugs and like selling people's appliances, or going to my mom's house and stealing her money out of her purse. Like all that stuff happened in the crack era, you know, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and again, you know, I don't know on the meth side, but I do know with like on, you know, the fentanyl and the opiates and everything, you know, you come down, you come down. So you got to re-up as quick as possible or you're going to be sick, you know.
Yeah.
That was always my deal was I wake up every morning and I might have enough for that morning. And my mission for the rest of the day is to figure out how the heck I'm supposed to go get high again, you know, no
Yeah.
matter what I had to do, because I knew I was going to be sick at that point. I knew what it was going to entail.
Mhm.
And it's for us being addicts, it's crazy because you sit there and you think just to be sick, like we get to a point now, you know, that where you don't really get high anymore. You just do it because that you don't want to be sick. And like you have to
Mhm.
be able to get through. And to know, like as an addict, that gut feeling when you know that you're out and you don't know if you're going to be able to re-up, how it's just that anxiety that comes with it and everything. It's like the end of the world, you know?
Yeah. I personally feel like for a woman, I don't know, this is my personal experience, but I think for a woman, it's like a little bit different, or for me, let's just say for me, right? Because I think that fentanyl and like the opiates is probably the most responsible drug that I've ever done. Because when you run out, you know you're going to be sick and you don't want to be sick. So you're willing to pre-plan, right? How you're going to get your money so that you can sustain your addiction. So when you're in crack, you spend all the money no matter what, and then you figure it out when you're done.
Right.
When you're in opiate addiction, you plan it out. And for a woman, this was my experience, you can continue your addiction if you're willing to pay the price. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, there wasn't many times. I mean, of course, I got sick a lot because you can't be in addiction and not get dope sick. You're going to get dope sick.
Yeah.
But I feel like for a woman, maybe it's easier to fall further down the rabbit hole because you have more means of making money.
Yeah, definitely.
I could see that. Definitely, you know, you have more options than men do, definitely so I completely understand. So down in, you know, to 28, 29, did you have kids at this point?
Yes.
So how was that? How was that raising kids and you know, being an addict?
Oh man, it was bad. So when I first had my kids, I was 24 and 25. And I got on the methadone program because I was already like doing pain pills back when my first boyfriend passed away, you know, so I was trying to manage at least my opiate addiction. And I wasn't really doing the stimulants when they were first born. I was just doing opiates, but I eventually got back into the stimulants, you know. So for the first couple of years of their life, like I was at home, I was being a mom, but I had all this unresolved trauma inside of me that I never dealt with. So, you know, I was still looking for a means of escape, which is eventually what led me to going back to the stimulants. So around that same time, actually the reason that I quit smoking crack is because I came here to Florida, right? Because I had moved away for a little while with my kids to start a family. I came back here to Florida, I brought my kids home. I was smoking crack, got caught. You know, my kids were at school. My neighbor caught me smoking crack through the sliding glass door at my apartment, called the Department of Children and Families on me. So that was like, you know, my first case plan here in Florida. And you know, it wasn't right then, but within the next year or two that I sent the kids to live with my mom because I couldn't stop using drugs, you know, and I didn't want them to be put in foster care. I knew I wasn't going to be able to pass their test because they had me jumping through flaming hoops to try to get my kids back, you know. So I sent the kids to live with my mom, and that is where I stepped from one drug to the other drug, right? Like I went from crack, because you can't manage it. Like everybody knows you're on crack. You're dirty. Nobody wants you in their house because you steal everything. You know, I mean, you look like you're on crack. but when I stepped over to meth, because it was the beginning of my meth addiction, it wasn't as obvious, you know what I mean? So I could kind of dabble in meth. It sustained me for way longer. I mean, I could do a line of meth and be good for hours and hours, up to like 12 to 18 hours, and then, but still, like I had just sent my kids to live with my mom. I had gotten off the MAP program, back on heroin, so it started to go downhill really fast from there.
Did you have the desire to get clean at that point, or were you not at that point yet?
No, not at all. I mean, the thing was, like, addiction is the only thing that I ever knew, right? So from a very young age, the only thing that made me feel good was using drugs. And I hated myself because I lost my kids to my drug addiction, even though they were with my mom, like, they weren't in my custody, and I hated myself for that. So it was like this hamster wheel that I was on, right? Like, I hated myself, so I used drugs. It made it worse. I hated myself, I used drugs. It made it worse, so it was like I was stuck in this cycle of going deeper and digging deeper down into that hole of addiction, but it wasn't long. Like, I started doing heroin, I started shooting it, I started shooting meth, because I hated myself and I was digging further deeper. I was also digging my way to my rock bottom at the same time.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I also got my kids taken away. Like I said, I had never heard your full story, and then now that you're telling it, it's like I can relate a lot to you because I also got away. I went out to the car and I ended up blacking out. I was gone for like a little over an hour. When I guess the people where I lived, my roommates, they called the cops because my in the room, and they were crying because I wouldn't come back. I literally came back like an hour, 30 minutes later. The cops were at my house, CPS was at my house, and that one hell.
Yes. Having CPS at your house is like the worst thing ever. Ever. I mean, it feels so demeaning, and the shame and guilt that comes behind that is just incredible. Not to mention the case plan the allegations that they write up on you, right? Did they give you a paper of allegations where they told you how horrible you were and all these things that you could have possibly did? Yeah.
That breaks you. Like, till this day, I cannot look at that. I still have that paperwork. And I remember being in jail. I never brought myself to be able to read the whole thing because I would just completely break down. I couldn't. I actually ended up getting criminally charged.
Wow.
So that's hard. That's really hard. And like, I can remember that day I actually got charged for I tackled one of the officers because I'm trying to walk in the house to get to my see what's going on, because like I said, I just came out of it. I completely blacked out in the car because I was so lit. And the cop's like, no, you can't go to your children. Like, what do you mean I can't go to my children? So I grabbed the cop and I tackled him to the wall, and then next thing you know, I got like 4 cops on top of me.
Wow. It's like a mother's instinct, right? Like, we have this, or I'm sure fathers too, like, we have this instinct inside of us to want to take care of our kids and be a parent and make sure they're safe. And they rip that away from you and tell you that you can't be around your kids because you're unfit and you're not safe and you're a bad person. And all the police, all the child welfare agents, like, everybody is up against you, and your family too, right? Because you have this case on you. Now your family thinks you're a piece of shit too. So it's like everybody, it just all compounds on you at once. And it's just the worst feeling ever,
I remember walking up into that first court. I was handcuffed from my wrist to my waist, my feet. I was shackled, and my kids looked at me scared, like literally so scared to see me walk in like that. And that was the worst feeling ever, like your own kids being scared of you,
That's so traumatizing.
Yeah, definitely. That's really hard when women go through that. I think that's really, really hard. It's really hard to get over, just the fact that you put your kids through that kind of pain.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is. It's hard, and it takes a lot of work, and really you kind of just have to suck it up for a while. I mean, you got to suck it up and push through it, and it does get better, but it takes some time, like a good amount of time.
Oh yeah, I would definitely say years. Like at the beginning, it was so hard for me to just even like take their love once they were ready because I felt like I didn't deserve it. I felt like I harmed them, like I did them dirty, that I couldn't even accept their love, although they were more than willing to love me. But it was so hard to accept it because I felt the shame and I felt the guilt and I felt like I didn't deserve their pure love, you know?
Yes, that's so interesting because my kids were the opposite, right? Like they didn't want to love me. I was like open arms, wanting them to accept me back into their life, but they weren't ready. You know what I mean? So I had to like wait it out, and they came home and I still had to walk it out for a while
Mm.
before they were willing to accept me back into their life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard.
So at what point, what is, whether it's a certain situation or whether, when did you finally start to say like, something's got to give? Like,
So
what happened?
So it was kind of like a series of unfortunate events, right? So first, my husband, I got married to my children's father back in 2009, and he kind of went through this roller coaster of addiction with me, even though I was doing all these like crazy ratchet things, right? Like we were both in addiction, and he was kind of ratchet too. So, anyways, in 2017, he got endocarditis from using and almost died. And, of all of my life, like I said back in the beginning, right? Like my father kind of left the picture, which I just want to say I have a relationship with my dad today. But when I was younger, like I searched and searched for that father figure. And I had abandonment issues because I thought that every man in my life was going to leave. My husband was the only person that never left. You know what I'm saying? Like no matter how ratchet I was or how much we fought or how horrible I was, because I felt like I was a horrible person. I deserved to be left. He never left my side. So in 2017, he got endocarditis and almost died. And they wouldn't let me go in the hospital because I was an addict covered in track marks. I mean, looked like a damn hoe with no clothes on. They didn't want me up at the hospital, and I don't blame them. But so anyways, he was in the hospital for about 6 months, and he finally got out. And then he got arrested days later. And that started his journey to recovery. I mean, it didn't happen right away, but he went to jail, to rehab, jail, to rehab, over and over again. But he was over there, right? So now I'm alone in my addiction. And I went from like bad to like really, really bad. Like it just didn't matter what I had to do, who I had to screw, who I had to step on, who I had to rob. Like it just didn't, like all bars, like there was nothing I wasn't willing to do. And what it led me to was living with a drug dealer in a shed, behind a trap house with no running water, no food, no shower, no, like nothing. It was like a bed in a shed in somebody's dirty ass backyard of a trap house, right? And, I wound up going out one night and I got 4 felonies. I got charged with 4 felonies on my birthday, July 19th, 2018. That's what started it for me. So when I went to jail, I got out on supervised release. And this is where, so the terms of my release were like, just don't use. Just don't use, call and report. If we call your color or whatever, you got to come drop. I made it like 2 months before I was violated and back in jail. I sat in jail for a little while. Then I got out on probation. Same deal. Terms of my probation. Just don't use, report once a month. So this is where I had the desire to stay clean, but I didn't have the ability to do it, right? Because I went right back to the drug dealer boyfriend. I went right back to the people that I was hanging out with, and I was shooting dope before you know it. I mean, within hours. So
Yeah.
I was at probation one day, and I got caught trying to falsify a drug test, right? Well, on my paperwork, I had put my mom's address, which is where my kids were. And I got caught trying to falsify. I admitted to him that I had been using meth because he kind of told me if I did that he wouldn't take me to jail. But guess what? He lied. So I went to jail, and he called Department of Children and Families on me. So this time I went back to jail. I sat in jail a little bit longer, got reinstated on my probation, had a case plan put on me, and I was out for like 30 days before I violated again. So by this point in time is July 1st, 2019. That is my clean date, the date of my last arrest. I was sitting in jail I had custody of like the day after I got there, Department of Children and Families showed up, gave me a drug test. I dropped dirty for 4 different things, got a new one of those case plans put on me with all the allegations. I had 2 violations of probation on 4 felonies, so I had a good amount of points where I was looking at going to prison. I didn't have what I had the whole rest of my life, which was the drugs to numb the pain, right? I didn't have that. I was coming off of a horrible detox, and I just hated myself because I used before to numb the pain of hating myself, but I couldn't do that anymore. So I hated myself, and the whole world fell down on me at once. And it was just like, I'm fucking sick and tired of living like this. I am fucking sick and tired of being this person. And I don't know at that point in time if I believed there was another way of life, but I knew I was sick and tired of living that way of life.
Yeah.
How much prison time were you
That dark
looking
hole,
at?
and like towards the end of it, like you're not even high, you're not even getting high for fun. Like it's no longer fun. You're just doing it literally to numb, because that's what I was doing it for. Because I felt so horrible that I didn't have my kids, you know, not having them, that's the worst thing you could do to me. That's the one thing that breaks me. But then having them, I was obviously, you know, damaging them by always being in my addiction. Obviously they didn't know, they didn't see it, but I wasn't a present parent. So it's just a vicious cycle. Like you don't even get high anymore because you like it. You get high because you have to numb, because you don't want to deal with that pain.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. I mean, it just becomes a chore. You know, you just use to use. You're not enjoying it. There's nothing fun about it. You are just a slave to it. And it's like you were saying earlier, Jared, I mean, you have to do it. I mean, if you don't do it, you get sick. So you have to continue using, even though everything that you love, the more you use, the further that stuff goes away. But you just keep choosing the drugs against your own will. Even when you don't want to use, you do it anyways.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not fun anymore, you know, at that point.
And it's
Right.
not an option. I hear a lot of people saying like drug addicts or users or alcoholics or whatever, it's an option. It just gets to a point where it's not. It really gets to a point where it's not. And you never imagine it's going to get to that point you're using. And you never think about the fact that one day this will no longer be an option. It will have to be a chore. Like you have to, you know, and I feel like that's something a lot of people don't understand. And it really, that's what it is. And that's what it is. It's a disease. You know, it might have been an option the first time, but after that, it's a wrap. It no longer becomes an option. It literally is something you have to do just to maintain, just to survive.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I've tried to explain to people. I mean, people say addiction, is it a choice? Is it a disease? And it starts with a bad choice, right? Like we chose to, but many people pick up a drink or a drug when they're a kid and don't become an addict. But the thing is, like we choose a drink or a drug when we're teenagers or whatever to escape trauma or grief or whatever that is, or because we're prescribed it by a doctor. And then one day, unknowingly, we cross over this invisible line, and now we can't stop. And the more that we go further into it, the worse our life gets, and the more unmanageable things get, and the deeper we get, and the further we fall from that choice that we had in the beginning. It's no longer a choice anymore.
Yeah, and the more you use, the more trauma is created, because you initially start off with whatever trauma happened to you as a child or whatever age you decided to pick up. But as your addiction progresses, I mean, you put yourself in situations that you're like, holy crap, you know what I mean? But it's shit that you have to go through, and it only creates more trauma that now you have to get over. For some people, it creates more abuse. They stay in abusive relationships, or they're the abuser, you know what I mean? And either way, it still creates trauma that now you have to do even more. So you use even more. And that's the part that I feel people don't understand, because I get a lot, well, why don't you just quit? Why don't you just stop? It's not that simple. It really, really is not. And people need to understand that it's not just like, okay, that's it. You know what? It's creating me problems. I'm going to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
You keep using because you want to numb away from those problems. You want to be able to solve those problems without the feeling of it, and that's not going to happen, because the feeling is what's going to make you it's what's going to lead you to make a right choice. But you're numbing that feeling, so you're thinking you're making the right choice, but you're only going down further down that hole.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember when I was in recovery and I first started working on myself, and somebody asked me, are you afraid? I don't know if I'm going to word this correctly, but are you afraid that when you stop using drugs, your life is going to be so miserable that you have to continue using drugs? You know what I mean? And that's what I used to think, right? Because when I didn't have drugs, I was so miserable. Like I just couldn't imagine living life without doing drugs. I knew no other way. And I didn't understand, like, how the hell do people get up in the morning and go to work? Like, how do they pay their bills? How do they like cook dinner? Like, all those things seem so foreign to me. And I couldn't imagine being content or happy doing those things because I was so miserable when I didn't have substances. It's like, there's no choice in the matter. You just have to continue to do it.
Right. I mean, there definitely is a scientific explanation to that. I mean, just using meth, I don't know what it is with all the other drugs, but I know using meth, you literally get injected so much dopamine that your brain, your receptors get used to. I think it's like 10 times the amount that you would usually get with anything else that gives you pleasure. So your receptors get used to that overload of it, that once you're not on it, like nothing, like for me, that was something I definitely thought about too, because I was like, dude, like nothing makes me happy anymore. Like I don't get pleasure out of things. The things I used to like, I no longer like them because of all that overload of dopamine that now your receptors are so out of whack.
Yes, and you are exactly right. And that's normal, right? So when you find recovery, be prepared for that. Like that's going to happen. You're going to not be excited about things for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Things aren't going to be fun for a little while. Like you're going to have to completely kind of be reborn and learn what you love to do and find joy in things. I mean, you have to completely start over. It's like a rebirth, right?
Right. You have to find yourself again. And that's what I tell people all the time. You will never, if you're trying to get that person that you were before you use drugs, you will never get that person back. That
Yeah.
person has been through so much. You have changed so much during your addiction and all the trauma you went through that once you're in recovery, you're definitely going to want to be another person, period. You don't want to be the person that you were when you were in addiction. But you will never get that person back. You need to find yourself. And that's hard. At the beginning of my recovery, I didn't even know what type of music I liked. I didn't even listen to music for so long. Even now, people are like, "Oh, you ever heard this song?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Where have you been living under a rock?" But it's just I didn't even know what taste in music I had anymore.
Same.
Yeah.
And everything changed, right? Because the stuff that I used to like, I don't like anymore. It doesn't bring me the same kind of excitement. I like a different kind of thing now that makes me feel good about myself for doing the right thing. So the things that I'm drawn to are different than what I was drawn to when I was in my addiction.
Right.
So how long did it take once you got out of jail and started working on your recovery before you got your kids back?
So what happened, like so when I was in jail, I was supposed to go to prison, right? And if I went to prison, I was going to lose the option to be able to get my kids back because I had this case plan on me. So literally the day of court, at the very last minute, I was supposed to take an offer to go to prison, 20 and a half months. I got granted a chance to go to treatment instead of prison because I went to this part of the jail called the recovery pod. I talked to a lady in there who pulled some strings, got me into treatment instead of prison. So going to treatment would mean that not only could I stay out of prison, but I could try to work this case plan and get my kids back. And while I was in treatment, they had parenting classes, so I was able to do that. I got the substance abuse part done, and then I had to get stable employment and stable housing. So what was suggested to me was to go to sober living, which is what I did. And, during that time while I was in treatment, my husband moved into a sober living house. So he was over here working on his recovery. And then I went to sober living and worked on my recovery. And we kind of just started working on ourselves for a while and saving money and working on being productive people of society and all those things, And so I got clean. My clean date is July 1st, 2019. And I brought my kids home in April 8th, 2020. So almost a year later, I was almost a year clean when I brought my kids home. We got an apartment. We saved up enough money to get an apartment. We moved in together on Valentine's Day. And then 2 months after that, we brought our kids home. So we had officially completed the case plan and were reunified and brought our kids home. But there's like a whole nother wave of stuff that goes behind that, right? Because like we were talking about earlier, when I brought my kids home, they weren't like thrilled with me. You know what I mean? They had been living with my mom for 6 years. So they
Mhm.
didn't trust me. And it was
Right.
a process. It was definitely a process.
Right. And I actually want to point out how lucky you were that somebody
Mhm.
would pull strings for you and get you into recovery instead of going to prison. Because I feel like somebody has to say this. I feel like CPS and the whole system is an entire freaking setup, because once you pick up a case plan, but you're also doing criminal charges, and usually when you pick up a CPA's plan, it's usually you will usually get criminally charged, right? So it's such a setup, because I went through that, and the fact that your case plan has an expiration date. If you go to jail, you have no control over that. Your expiration date is still the same date, and if you lose that, you completely lose your children. So you were very lucky that you were able to get into recovery and you were able to continue working your case plan, because while being in jail, there's not many options. If you're
Mhm.
still able to work a case plan while being in jail, that's cool, because it will continue your case. But there's not many options while being in jail, so you're literally sitting there doing dead time, because it brings
Mhm.
nothing to the table for your case plan with CPS.
No, you're exactly right. And the thing is, like, the maximum amount of time that you're going to get on a case plan is like 18 months, right? That's with the continuances, because it's supposed to be 12 months, but they can extend it to 18 months if there's some progress happening.
Right.
If I was to have gotten sentenced to prison time, they would have given guardianship to my mom. And that's what they wanted to do. They told me that's what they wanted to do. And you're right. I was very blessed that the treatment center I went to had the parenting classes, because it put me ahead of the game. I got the substance abuse done, and like all those things. Like, I was lucky and I've seen it. And the thing is, like, when I got out of treatment, there was so much I had to do. I had to drug test 3 times a week, 2 for probation, 1 for Department of Children and Families. I had to go to work. I had to work my program of recovery. I had to go to these appointments with the caseworkers. Like, I had to do all this stuff, court. I mean, there was just so much stuff to do. It feels like a setup for failure, right? Because how do you work a job and, all these things when you have to do 9 million things all the time? It's difficult. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like my biggest thing too. I'm like, how do you guys expect me to have stable housing, and then you have to have a certain size apartment depending on the amount of kids you have, because they all need to have their own room. And you're like, how do I do that? How do I do that with therapy, drug treatment, with all these classes, parenting classes, domestic violence, if you were in it? Like, there's so much they put you through, and then your own kids' individual therapy, and you have to take them to this and you have to do that. And it's like, how do I work a job? And they don't even let you work like a graveyard shift, which would also be a setup, because if
Yep.
you're used to using meth or whatever, or
Yep.
uppers, obviously if you're in a graveyard shift, you're eventually gonna be like, okay, I need to use, because I'm so tired from all these things during the day. I have to work now. It really is a setup. I don't see how they don't understand that. And not many. I mean, I feel like there's not very many people make it through that.
Yeah, and just like you said before, right? Like, I've got 9 million things to do. I've got to work. I've got to do the case plan. I've got to do my probation for my criminal charges. Like, I've got all these things to comply with, but I'm tired because I'm early in recovery and I don't have the energy to do everything. So I think that's where people fall off at, because they're like, oh, I know how I can get that energy. They won't know,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? But for me, like, I'm glad that I had to do those 3 drug tests a week, because that's what kept me clean in the beginning. It
Yeah.
truly is. I couldn't have used one day and got away with it. I had to drug test on Monday and Friday, or Tuesday and Thursday, and I didn't know the other day. So 3 days a week, and that kept me for my first 18 months in recovery. So I'm grateful for that now, because when it finally went away, like, my life had gotten good. Like, I had my kids, I had my own place, I had a driver's license and a car. I had the things that I always wanted before, but I could never get my grasp on. So I'm grateful that I had to do all that drug testing, because it kept me clean for a
Right.
while.
Held you accountable.
Yeah.
So how hard was it once your kids came back home to earn their trust, to earn their love? Did that take a long time? How did you go about it? What did you do? What was your strategy with them?
Yeah, that was really hard. And the thing is, like, I had to accept responsibility for my actions, right? I'm the one that used drugs and sent them to my mom's and left them there for 6 years. That was me, and it's okay if they're mad. It's okay if they don't trust me. It's okay if they don't want to hug me or tell me they love me. Like, I have to understand that, because those are the consequences of my actions. So basically, with the help of my support network, because I spent many nights on the phone talking to my sponsor and my friends and saying, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a mom. I am fucking this up, and just talking through it and putting one foot in front of the other. And, they didn't trust that I was going to come home when I said I was going to come home, because I used to just dip out all the time, They
Right.
didn't trust that I wasn't going to steal their money, because I used to steal the money out of their piggy banks. I had to earn that trust by putting one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, and following through with what I say I'm going to do. It took some time, and I feel like where we're at now is a really good place, but it took us at least more than a year to get to where we're at now.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage and a lot of motivation, because sometimes kids say things that you're like, dang, and they hit you, but they're right. So you can't even say anything. Like, I still get sometimes my sense. So when I come home, I immediately take my shoes off. Like, I hate wearing my shoes at the house, but sometimes I forget, right? And just the other day, I had my shoes on, and my son was like, take your shoes off. You're not going anywhere. And I was like, I'm not. I just forgot to take them off, But I definitely still get those moments where it's like PTSD for them, and they're like, why is she wearing her shoes? She's going to take off. Like you said, I used to take off at all. Like, they would go in the room, and I would just wait for them to like turn around, and I would leave, so they still get those flashbacks.
Yeah, same. And I think in the long run, there's a lot of work that still has to be done. Like, we're never going to be cured, or we're never going to be completely healed. Like, we have to continue to work on it and have resources for them if they choose to. My kids they did therapy when I was out of the picture, and they don't want to do therapy now. So I can't, even if I made them do therapy, it's not going to work unless they're willing, but we do leave that door open if they want to talk about it. We're here. And if they want to talk to somebody else, that's okay too.
Right. That's very important.
Yeah, by the grace of God, I never had to experience any of this, so I can only feel for you guys, and I can only imagine. But right at end result is you guys have your kids back, and life is where it's at now. So tell us, what's life like today for you?
I mean, it honestly blows my freaking mind where my life is at today. It really does. Like, before I was a homeless, junkie that slept from couch to couch. It just didn't matter. Like, I did whatever. And today, I have my kids at home with me. I own my own home. I have a job. As a matter of fact, last week, I accepted a job to help parents get their kids back, like to work in the system, but not as a social worker, on the other side, right? How the kids have like a guardian ad litem. It's sort of like that, but for the parents. So, like, everything that I've been through, it's a new thing going. I don't want to name it, but it's new. But I'm so excited, right? Like, everything that I've been through, I get to use to help other people. Like, that's the most amazing thing in the world. And I just started sharing my story kind of by a fluke last year, and it just absolutely blows my mind how much it has blown up, and what a need there is for it. There's so many people that have been through this that just don't talk about it, or so many people that are in it right now, so, and my husband is doing great. Our marriage is better than it's ever been, ever. After everything that we've been through, it has solidified who we are today, So, life is freaking amazing.
And this is why we do what we do, just like you said, because there's too many people right now that are going through, the early stages of recovery, and they just feel like it's going to be a failure. We want people to know that, I've been through it, Bonnie's been through it, you've been through it. Like, we can come up from where we were. Like, just because we were an addict and we went through and we either went to jail or lost kids or anything, all that can change. God can change that around 100%. And, I'm religious, but not so religious at the end of the day. But the way I look at it is, you can't tell me that God isn't real. I have to look at all of our lives and where we've come like, you cannot tell me that God doesn't exist, because we've been pulled out of hell. So this is why we do what we do, and to share your stories and to just give other people hope and inspiration, and we need to work together as a community. I was explaining to Jamie the other day, like, too many people out here, and what we're doing is so much competition, who can have more followers, who can do this, and it's like, why don't we just, we can do this together as a community, and be able to reach more and just work together. And so we definitely appreciate you sharing your story, because people need to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Unity, right? Like if we come in unity together, we can get so much further.
Yeah, advocacy. There's so many people who either don't have the courage because they feel like they're really down and under, or they're just shy to speak. But somebody needs to talk about all these things, because we will definitely reach people who aren't doing it themselves, and maybe give them the courage to do so. Definitely going through not just addiction, CPS, and that's why it's so important to share our stories, because we will definitely touch people either in one way or the other. And it doesn't always have to be addiction, just their stories are very similar, and advocating for everything we need advocating for. There's so many things that are not talked about, because addiction doesn't only come with addiction. It's not only drugs. It's not only, and most definitely comes with a ton of other things that you acquired through your whole addiction. And it's amazing that you share your story, and I really appreciate what you do with the advocating for parents through CPS, because I exactly know what you do, and that's absolutely amazing. People definitely need to feel like there's somebody on their side, because you don't feel like that you're alone. Everybody looks at you, like you said, like you ain't shit. And definitely all we need sometimes is just someone, that one person. It doesn't even matter if it's family or not. It can be a stranger, and sometimes a stranger will provide more support than your own family. So we all need that one person to just know that they believe in us, that we will get through this, and we do. So I really appreciate what you do, Sonya. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love what you said, right? Just finding that one person that believes in me, because we believe in the next person, right? Because I've been there. Like I was broke and busted, what I mean? And if I can come up from that, like anybody can do it. Anybody.
Yeah.
There's a guy that I recently met when I was in New York. He's a really good guy. He's very early on in his recovery. And I check on him every single day. I message him and I check in with him. And he tells me day after day, he's in so much shock and awe that somebody cares, because, about him. And I'm like, we've all been there. We know what it feels like to be at the bottom. We know what it feels like to have people turn their backs on us, to feel like we're not shit, and just to have somebody know, like, hey, I'm here with you. I'm walking with you. You're not alone, and this is the thing, recovery can bring great things in our lives, but let's be honest, in the beginning, I mean, it's not perfect, people, it's not, you just get sober and, you snap your fingers and life's great. There's crap you're going to have to work through, there's probably legal things you got to work out through, and it's just, that's the way it is. But that's part of making amends and part of, righting your wrongs and everything. And it's just, people have to know that it may look, rainy and dark now, but just keep pushing through and the sun will start shining.
Right. That's real.
Yeah, it's most definitely doable. Look at Sonya. She was living in a shed, somebody's trap house backyard, and she's a homeowner now.
Yeah.
She's a homeowner now.
Yeah.
I know. I saw it in your stories. That's absolutely amazing. You never think you'll be like, you have nothing to your name. You literally sometimes travel around with a trash bag in your bag with whatever your belongings are, because you don't got nowhere to put it. And look at you being a homeowner now. That's amazing.
You know what's funny? When I got out of jail, what I left jail with was the clothes they issued me in jail, which we call them the whites down here. I don't know what they're called in other places, but you have your undershirt and your white boxers and your white socks. That's what I left jail with. I had literally nothing to my name, nothing. And today I have like more than I could have ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
But it just everybody that's watching and listening, she's, living proof that you can change and your life can turn around. And as long as your head's straight and your heart is right and your intentions are pure, this is recovery. I can't imagine living life any other way, and so thank you again, Sonya. Thank you for sharing your story. Real quick, if you just want to share where we can find you, we'll put all the links in and everything. But if you just want to share, where we can find you at and kind of go from there.
Sure. So on all of my social profiles, if you look in my bio, there's a link tree that I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
And we'll be sure to link all of those links in the description of whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or whatnot. And man, we it's awesome. Thank you again. And this is going to be, hopefully, we can do some more things together, some more collaborations, and
Yeah.
things are really coming together for us and for you. And we just got to keep working together and keep pushing forward.
Yes, I'm totally down to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Any
All right.
merch coming soon?
I'm working on it. It's in my bio. I'm working on it. I just want to I don't want to be one of those people that has like one. Everybody's got different style, but two coming soon.
Right.
Stay tuned, folks. Coming
Yes.
soon.
Right. All right. So again, thank you, Sonya. And I'm going to stop this recording and then we'll chat really quick. But thank you again, everybody, for listening. Thank you for watching. Definitely check out Sonya on all her socials. Check out us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, fam.